Today we continue the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta. I believe is the fourth week that we've been on the sutta so far. And we'll start the part 3 section, the third section of the sutta. And this is where people can relate more, shall we say, with the sutta itself, been given the title, when most of us connect the meaning of Mahāparinibbāna referring to the death and all the events that took place prior, during, and even after Lord Buddha's death, related with the title of the sutta, Mahāparinibbāna. So today we get to the section that is entitled Relinquishing the Will to Continue Living. And this is where all of the sections that Lord Buddha has covered in the sutta prior to getting this point are, they become very pertinent, because every single sermon, every single discourse that Lord Buddha has ever given has had a purpose, has had its own causes and conditions, and things that have led to it. And in this sutta, even though it's the sutta number 16 of the Dīgha Nikāya, the long discourses, but it is a giant, as it has been mentioned before, because it's also a connecting sutta, a discourse that connects so many suttas together. Because after all, we're talking about not just the ending of the life of Lord Buddha, but also his legacy for 45 years. What has he been teaching? So all of these things come to play a role. We've seen during the last 3 weeks how Lord Buddha was emphasizing the importance of having virtue, the very glue that keeps the person sane, protected, and by those two factors within the individual, inevitably the society as such also becomes protected. Something that we have lost as a society in the world, because there is no virtue, hardly any. In the world today, you have these pockets of individuals wanting to reestablish that, questioning the very lifestyles that we have been promoting and been encouraged to promote. We talk about Buddhism or the Dhamma as a lifestyle, but oftentimes many have the wrong view or the misunderstanding when it comes to Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña. These have become for many, many of us just like a mantra. Yes. The Dhamma it's three-pronged. Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña. Yes, I understand. But do we? How much virtue is there in your life? That's a good place to start. How much virtue was there in your day? That's a wonderful place to start in connection to your question about, why is my meditation not going so well? Or how come I'm not having as many insights as I used to when I was on retreat, for example? But it wasn't just about virtue, if you noticed. It's also about the faith that people have had. Last week we came across Ambapali, the courtesan. And we also saw from the beginning of the sutta of how Vassakara, the chief minister, had been questioning Lord Buddha to see how he could overcome another kingdom or principality. But that also was playing in the teachings that Lord Buddha gave even last week about the barriers for having or from having an immoral life. There is no spiritual growth without morality. There's no way. And remember, immoral life does not necessarily means living the life of being reminded of Ambapali, the life of a courtesan. No. Or getting into drugs, this and that. No. Not necessarily. Just that, of course. But it could be subtle non-virtuous life. For example, we might have the position that our dedication to our career, making it a priority in my life to earn a living, to have a successful business, have this entrepreneurship or something, or even one's own family, making that a priority versus understanding or trying to understand what the Dhamma is trying to say with the Four Noble Truths. Because that priority is not the priority that Lord Buddha encourages for one to have. It is a priority as such, but it is not the priority. That's what I'm trying to say. Because we're all individually suffering. We have been, and we will continue to suffer, whether we have that business, whether we have that family or not. If it's your children, or if it's your family, if it's your loved ones, it's part of anicca, it's part of sankhara, it's part of conditionality. They came, they're there temporarily, they will go. The pain will remain. What is my position towards that? Am I suffocating that pain? That is the question that Lord Buddha wants us to ask. Hence, dukkha becomes a priority for us to understand. So, virtue can also extend to that type of an understanding. That's what makes the Dhamma Samādhi. Otherwise, we can call ourselves whatever we like, but if we have wrong view, how is that going to help? How is that going to help? You might know every sutta out there, but how is that bringing you closer and closer to the goal of the holy life, which is breaking free from that dukkha and the causes for that dukkha? That is what Lord Buddha taught. He didn't just teach dukkha, he taught the second thing as well. He says several times, I teach two things, dukkha and the release from dukkha, nirodha. So are my priorities getting me closer to nirodha? That's another way of asking ourselves that question, to check to see whether my priorities are in line with the Dhamma or not. So that's what I would like us to, have in mind when we're going through this section, instead of just looking at it as a novel piece, like something like a lovely story, that especially when we get into the dynamics, the relational dynamics between Venerable Ānanda and Lord Buddha. So I just wanted to kind of encourage us to look at it from another point of view, instead of just what often we have come to accept from this sutta. So, relinquishing the will to continue living is the name of this section, and the subsection name or the subheading is a clear indication. The indication here is being referred to the indication that Lord Buddha will be giving to Venerable Ānanda, which will not be noticed, sadly. So let us begin. Then, having risen in the morning, the Blessed One put on his robes, and by taking his alms bowl and outer robe, he went into Vesali for alms. On his return from the alms round, the Blessed One ate his meal and then spoke to the Venerable Ānanda by saying, Ānanda, let us spend the day at the Chāpala shrine. Bring along the sitting cloths with you, as you wish, Lord. And as bhikkhus, you know, we carry a cloth, especially when we are out and about. We need to protect the robes, so we have a cloth usually with us that we spread on the rock or on the ground to sit on. So that's what Lord Buddha is referring to here. And by taking the sitting cloths with him, the Venerable Ānanda followed closely behind the Blessed One, step by step. The Blessed One went to the Chāpala shrine and sat down on the seat that was prepared for him. And after paying homage to the Blessed One, the Venerable Ānanda sat to one side, and the Blessed One said to him, Ānanda, Vesali is quite lovely. Its shrines too are lovely, be it the Udena, Gotamaka, Sattambaka, Bahuputta, Sarandada, or the Chāpala shrine. And the Blessed One continued by saying, Ānanda, whoever has fully developed and cultivated, practiced, retained, strengthened, maintained, scrutinized, and brought to perfection the four constituents of psychic power, could, if he so desired, remain alive for an entire lifespan, or fully completed until the end of that lifespan. The Tathagata Ānanda has perfected those constituents of psychic power. Therefore, if the Tathagata so desires, he could remain alive for an entire lifespan, or fully completed until the end of that lifespan. And here, Lord Buddha is referring to the Iddhipada. These are the four, sometimes called the four bases of psychic power. Sometimes they're called the four bases for spiritual power. And they're basically Chanda, Virya, Chitta, and Vimamsa, or Vimamsaka. So look at Lord Buddha is trying, this is the indication, this is the clue, this is the obvious clue that he is giving. Now, something has to be said about this paragraph, because nearly every translation that we've come across, including many teachers I've sat at their feet and listened to this sutta, especially when they came to this section, oftentimes have translated this as kappa or kalpa or an eon. So oftentimes it's no surprise to find teachers still talking about what Lord Buddha is referring to as an eon of time. And Lord Buddha was a pragmatist. He was a practical person. He was a practical teacher. The word that we have to also take into consideration is ayu kappa. Ayu means life. Ayu, that's where we also get the term in Indian medicine, for example, Ayurveda. So ayu means a life. Kappa, in this case, it's the span, the time frame, just like in the case of a human being, let's say today, living. The average lifespan, I've read articles on this, and when they talk about centenarians, for example, people who live to be 100, or super centenarians who go beyond, roughly it's about 130 years. But that doesn't mean that a human being is definitely, most certainly going to live, each of us, to 130 years. Many people die before that. So Lord Buddha was here at the age of 80. Now remember, many people were dying at the age of 40 in those days. So to be alive until you're 80 was quite an accomplishment, shall we say? So, but Lord Buddha knew that he can live a little bit longer, but his pain was so intense. And he was aged. He was saying how he's like a dilapidated cart, you know, a chariot that's being held together by different types of leather bands and ropes, and it's very, you know, shaky. So he was in pain. He would, most of the last days, we see him reclining in the lion's posture as he was giving Dhamma discourses. That's how painful it was. So, but he's saying if he was asked, if he so desired, and in this case, Lord Buddha didn't desire to necessarily live for his own sake, but only for the sake of his students. And that's what a teacher does. He doesn't do anything for his own sake. That's why Lord Buddha is the epitome of selflessness. So here he's saying, whoever has those powers, those four bases of power, psychic power, they could extend their lifespan to the maximum of that age for that species, in this case, a human being. So that is how I translate this. But despite such an obvious clue, the Venerable Ānanda was unable to grasp this very clear and significant indication given by the Blessed One, as though his mind was veiled by Mara. For he did not make use of this great opportunity to beseech the Blessed One by saying, Bhante, may the Blessed One please remain for an entire lifespan. May the Sugata please remain and fully complete it until the end of his lifespan. Please, O Lord, stay for the welfare and happiness of the multitude of beings throughout, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, the well-being, and happiness of both devas and humans. And for a second and a third time, the Blessed One repeated his words. Ānanda, Vesali is quite lovely. Its shrines are too lovely, be it Idiyudena, Gotamaka, Sattambaka, Bahuputta, Sarandada, or the Chapala shrine. As he continued by saying, Ānanda, whoever has fully developed and cultivated practice, retained, strengthened, maintained. So he says the same thing again. So he could extend it to his entire lifespan. But for a second and a third time, despite such an obvious hint, the Venerable Ānanda remained quiet, unable to grasp this very clear and significant indication offered by the Blessed One, as though his mind was veiled by Mara, for he did not make use of this great opportunity to beseech the Blessed One. Then the Blessed One arose from his seat and said to the Venerable Ānanda, Go now, Ānanda, and do whatever seems fit to you. You can almost hear his disappointment in his voice. Because imagine had he stayed that long, let's say another at least 20 years, maybe 40 years, the full lifespan, let's say, or just 20 years, how many more people would have become arahants? And this is my way of my impression from hearing and reading and translating these words and trying to put myself there in that situation. Ānanda was his companion, his attendant for 25 years. But Lord Buddha knew his mind, knew Ānanda's mind. So as a Tathagata, he is supposed to also put this opportunity in front of his attendant. So the attendant is the liaison, the ambassador between, for us, human beings, and the Tathagata at this stage. And Ānanda says, Very well, Bhante, replied the Venerable Ānanda as he got up from his seat, and after respectfully saluting the Blessed One and keeping him to his right, he left and found himself a place to sit under a tree some distance away. Now we get to the next section. It's called Mara's plea. His request, his demand, in fact. Once the Venerable Ānanda had left the Blessed One's side, Mara, the mischievous one, approached the Blessed One. I chose the mischievous one because sometimes it's translated as evil, the evil one. And many people try to relate or try to do, draw comparisons between Mara and Satan of the Judeo-Christian Islamic traditions. And they just don't match. In that sense, Mara is not necessarily evil, but he's very cunning, he's very deceitful. He enjoys when a person falls. He enjoys when a person relinquishes their faith in the sasana. So many people get stuck on the path because they hold on to something because of the deceptions. So he's mischievous. He's almost like a little brat. He's almost like a cunning little, child who enjoys playing tricks. So he's very mischievous. So in that sense, it makes more sense than just flat out calling him evil. Standing to one side, Mara spoke these words to the Blessed One. It is now time, Bhante, for the Blessed One to attain his final full release. That's the Parinibbāna. Let the Sugata fully and completely pass away. The time has come for the Parinibbāna of the Lord. And why is he so much in a hurry? Why is he urging Lord Buddha to go? This is nothing new because he had been trying to do this for 45 years straight, especially the first night of Lord Buddha's awakening. And especially in the beginning, when Lord Buddha was trying to decide for himself whether he should teach the Dhamma or not. So, and this is actually related with those earlier conversations between Lord Buddha and Mara, who had come to ask Lord Buddha at that time, 45 years earlier, to attain Parinibbāna right there and then, because he was afraid that people would find the Dhamma and get to release themselves and attain freedom from samsara. So he would have less people, less beings to seduce, less beings to persuade to stick around in samsara. Many people, meanwhile, did attain full release. And that's what Mara is here for. And let's see what they say, what he says to Lord Buddha. After all, Bhante, the Blessed One himself once spoke these words to me. I shall not come to my final passing away, O mischievous one, until my bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female lay disciples have all come to be true noble disciples, who are wise, well-disciplined, capable, and learned, preservers of the Dhamma, living according to and firmly established in the Dhamma. That means, at the very least, sotapannas. Until my bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female lay disciples live by the appropriate conduct and, having learned the Master's word, are able to expound it, preach it, proclaim it, establish it, reveal it, explain it in detail, and make it clear, until they are fully able to refute any adverse opinions and doctrines that might arise, being able to overcome them thoroughly while explaining in a convincing manner, as they teach the true and liberating Dhamma. In a convincing and liberating manner, the Pali text says. And remember, that is another version of what we mean by Sangha. Bhikkhu, Bhikkhuni, Upasaka, and Upasika. That was the full Sangha. That Mara is now trying to remind Lord Buddha, hey, do you remember? These were the things you said to me, that you're going to attain Parinibbāna when you have these 4 classes of beings who can stand by the Dhamma, who can speak and attest to from experience in a convincing and liberating manner, meaning when they speak, it even caused the liberation of other beings. Others could come to the Dhamma. It's basically the proliferation of the Dhamma, if you like. So, but now, Bhante, the Blessed One does have bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female lay disciples, who have all come to be true noble disciples indeed, who are wise, well-disciplined, capable, and learned, preservers of the Dhamma, living according to and firmly established in the Dhamma. The Blessed One's own bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, male and female lay disciples live by the appropriate conduct, Sīla, and have learned the Master's word, are able to expound it, preach it, proclaim it, establish it, etc. Also, they are fully able to refute any adverse opinions and doctrines that might arise. Basically, they are able to identify the Dhamma from the Adhamma. This is very important. Unfortunately, today, one of the reasons why the sasana is crumbling and Lord Buddha's teachings are disappearing exponentially is because there's so much adhamma claiming itself to be dhamma. And that is one of the reasons, one of the main reasons why a student of the Dhamma, whatever level they might be on of understanding, they need to jump headfirst into the suttas. They have to study. They have to understand what is the word of Lord Buddha. What is the Buddha word? They need to understand what has Lord Buddha said about this, about that, instead of hearing or listening to some other secondary, tertiary accounts of it. So it behooves upon the person to do that, because we're all part of these four categories. You are all upasakas and upasikas, if you think of it, if you're practicing Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña. So Mahā is saying, well, now you've achieved that. You have all these four classes of students. Therefore, it is now time, Bhante, for the Blessed One to attain his final full release. Let the Sugata fully and completely pass away. The time has come for the Parinibbāna of the Lord. After all, Bhante, the Blessed One once spoke these words to me. So he continues, I shall not come to my final and full release, O mischievous one, until this holy life taught by me has become successful, prosperous, widespread, popular, extensive, and well known, until it is well proclaimed and spread far and wide among devas and humans. And now, Bhante, this too has been achieved. For the holy life taught by the Blessed One has become successful, prosperous, widespread, popular, extensive, and well known, for it is well proclaimed and spread far and wide among devas and humans. Therefore, now is the time, Bhante, for the Blessed One. So he's pretending like he's there, almost like a dear friend. He's like coming to give counsel, basically. But that's another thing. Mahā is so incorrigible. He never gives up. He never gets the point. And he's always hoping. I mean, even as Lord Buddha being the Tathagata, so many times you see Mahā coming by and trying to seduce him with, sexual lust, or trying to throw things like that in his direction. Still, he doesn't grasp. Mahā doesn't grasp. So in that sense, he is drenched with miccāditthi, even though he's very smart, very cunning. So now he's trying to play that game of, see, that was the agreement, I'm here for that. It's time for you to just leave. Because he was also aware of what the conversation was when Lord Buddha offered Ānanda the option of appealing to him to stay for an entire lifespan. So he saw that opportunity went amiss. So the time has come for the Parinibbāna of the Lord. And then we get to the next section where it says, the Blessed One relinquishes his will to live. Now we get to the gist of the Mahā Parinibbāna Sutta. Now you see the ominous, themes unfolding. When this was said, the Blessed One spoke to Mahā, the mischievous one, by saying, do not trouble yourself, O mischievous one. Before long, the Parinibbāna of the Tathagata will soon come to pass. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will enter final full release. And it was then, while at the Chapala shrine, that the Blessed One, mindfully and with full alertness and careful consideration, with sati and sampajañña, those are there. He's not overwhelmed with grief, disappointment, and these people, they're not worth it. Look at me, look at my attendant. He missed such an opportunity. Those matters don't occur with an enlightened being, especially someone of the caliber of the Tathagata. So he's doing whatever he has advised and taught, he is the personification of that. He's living with Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña. He's living with sati and sampajañña. That's what the sutta is reminding us of. So with full sati and sampajañña, the Lord Buddha relinquished his will to continue living. Immediately upon the Blessed Lord's renouncing his will to live on, there took place a tremendous earthquake, terrifying, dreadful, and hair-raising as thunders rolled across the skies. Understanding the significance of this extraordinary event, the Blessed One uttered these solemn words. Whether appearing within worlds that are measurable or immeasurable, or confined within the world of the six senses, meaning Kama Loka, Rupa Loka, or Arupa Loka. He's talking about the three worlds system. All of the 31 layers of existence fall into these categories. The sage has renounced by giving up the craving for becoming, inwardly remaining serene and calm. Much like cutting through a thick chainmail, he bursts out of this self-made shell of an armor. The chainmail is what ancient times soldiers would wear in both in the West and in the East. It obstructs arrows from going in that easily, at least, and it protects the warrior where there is slashing motions of swords and things like that. So it gives them a little bit of a buffer. So, but it keeps the soldier a prisoner of it until they remove the heavy chainmail. These are like tiny little rings made of metal, if you don't know, and they can be in the thousands, covering the whole body like a armor. It's a suit, basically. Next section's title is 8 Causes for Earthquakes. Then it came to the mind of the Venerable Ānanda. How marvelous it is indeed and most breathtaking. The earth shakes powerfully. So he was sitting afar, but he was able to feel the earthquake. So this also is a testimony in a way to show us that it was not something that Lord Buddha was just experiencing, which could make it be perhaps in the minds of some people simply or purely a subjective event, only happening in Lord Buddha's mind, in a sense. Here, Venerable Ānanda is sitting far, if you noticed. He went and sat there under a tree, so he felt the earthquake with that intensity as was felt over there with Lord Buddha. The earth shakes powerfully, so tremendously. How terrifying, dreadful, and hair-raising it is, as thunders roll across the skies like this. Now, what could be the reason for this? What is the cause for such a mighty earthquake to be taking place? And the Venerable Ānanda went straight back to the Blessed One, and after respectfully greeting him, sat down to one side and said, Bhante, how marvelous it is indeed. So he repeats the whole thing about the earthquake taking place and what could be the cause of it. Then the Blessed One said, Ānanda, there are 8 reasons, 8 causes for a mighty earthquake like this to take place. What are those 8? This great earth, Ānanda, is positioned upon liquid, the liquid upon the atmosphere, and the atmosphere upon space. And when, Ānanda, mighty atmospheric disturbances take place, the liquid underneath becomes agitated, and because of the agitation of the liquid underneath, tremors and earthquakes shake up this great earth. This is the first reason, the first cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. So, if you have studied science, let's say geology, and you hear this and being mentioned 2,600 years ago, and no one tells you that it is from 2,600 years ago almost, you'll say, yeah, that sounds about right, in almost like a poetic language that it's laid out. But when you look at it as a scientist, it is not too far from being science-based, one could argue. Because if we look at what Lord Buddha is mentioning as liquid, well, let's start with the ground, the crust. We call it in science. I used to teach science, and when I read this portion, I was like, wow, Lord Buddha got it right. Because we have the Earth's crust where we live, and it could be as thick in some places as 50 miles. But underneath that, there is a layer of the Earth, and it's underneath the layer of the crust, and it could be as much as 1,700 miles thick. And that is the liquid rock we call the mantle. That's where the lava comes out of. So, but the atmosphere and the space around it, we can think of it perhaps in terms of solar bursts that we have, and which affect the atmosphere, and which in turn can shake the, can affect and do affect the Earth's mantle, which inevitably cause earthquakes. That's one. So scientifically, one might argue that this is quite valid and plausible. So let us see what's the next. Also, Ānanda, when a recluse or a religious practitioner of great psychic power, one who has gained mastery of his mind, or a deva who is mighty and powerful, while developing his intense concentration to a limited extent upon the earth element, but while at the same time being focused in his concentration and to a boundless degree upon the liquid element, then he too can cause the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the second reason, the second cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. So basically, the volitional action that is causing an effect of this person who has developed those abilities, let's say the iddhipadas. But if you noticed, the emphasis here is to a boundless degree upon the liquid element. So liquid means unstable, not as stable as earth or as solidity, as the earth element. So here there is a discrepancy in the concentration of the person. So you have to play, you have to remove the emphasis of the concentration from the earth. Otherwise, there's just balance. It's just stability. It's like action, reaction. If it's equal amount of force applied, nothing is going to move. So in this case, the way I understand it anyhow, the emphasis on the concentration aspect of the meditator or the yogi, be it human or deva, is mostly placed upon the liquid, which causes the giving away of the earth's solid state. It becomes shaky and it trembles. Also, Ānanda, when the bodhisattva departs from the Tusita realm and descends into his mother's womb, mindfully, fully alert, with careful consideration, sati and sampajanya, that especially significant event too causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the third reason, the third cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. Here, the bodhisattva that Lord Buddha is referring to is not the bodhisattvas that you keep hearing about in Mahayana or Vajrayana. None of those things. Those were much later additions. They had nothing to do with the teaching of Lord Buddha as such, especially in this context. Bodhisattva here is referring to the Buddha to become, meaning, like the case was with Lord Buddha, Gautama, before any of the Buddhas appear, well, in human form, when they struggle, eventually they become Buddhas, but they reside in Tusita realm. While residing there, they've already completed their paramis, their perfections. So, and they're there simply, if you will, if you like, they're there to simply catch their breath, because they've had a very, very rough ride through eons working on their perfections. So they, if you like, they get a resting period at Tusita realm, but the moment comes when they say, okay, I am here for this reason, and it's time for me to, this is the appropriate time for me to go to the human realm. Not necessarily this world, Mother Earth, but it could be any similar Earth. Especially when you take account of the parallel universes, etc. And so, but the human realm, there's many, many realms where human beings exist, many worlds, that is. So The Tusita realm is the place where the Bodhisattva will descend from, consciously with sati and sampajañña into the mother's womb. So he will select a mother-to-be who has virtue, as well as the father, husband and wife, let's say, they need to have good Sīla. So he will basically choose the Bodhisattva. As he's descending into the womb, there's an earthquake. That's the other cause. Also, Ānanda, when the Bodhisattva comes out of his mother's womb, mindfully, fully alert, and with careful consideration, that especially significant event too causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the fourth reason, the fourth cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. That's, I think, already it says so. It's self-explanatory. Some people might have an issue with that because they say, well, it's a fetus, it's a newborn. How can the newborn have sati and sampajañña? Well, it's amazing when the mind is developed to a certain level of equanimity. Let's start from there. When it can go back as you are looking into your past lives. There are practices, but I recommend individuals to have reached the fourth jhana, where the mind can get calm and tranquil enough to be unshakable when seeing certain things in their past, especially when they want to go to the beginning point of this life, this latest life. They can be able to see their birth. But in the case of a bodhisattva, they have a lot more concentrative abilities because they have consciously entered the womb and consciously are coming out of the body. Now, the brain has to develop because there's the sense of identification. Remember, they have not yet reached Nibbana. They have to find a way first. They have to go through the jhanas, all these things. But their merits and their work done on understanding the mind with sati and sampajañña is impeccable, enough for them to see these events taking place, even though for most of us, if not all of us, is rather unconscious. So those were some things I felt like were needed to be said. Also, Ānanda, when the Tathagata becomes fully awakened in unsurpassed supreme enlightenment, that especially significant event too causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the fifth cause, the fifth reason, the fifth cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. And that's something we have seen in the Udanas, the suttas, where on the night of his awakening, the earth shook. Also, Ānanda, when the Tathagata sets the excellent wheel of the Dhamma in motion by teaching it for the first time, that especially significant event too causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the sixth reason, the sixth cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes, as we've seen in the Dhammacakkappavattana Sutta. Also, Ānanda, when the Tathagata relinquishes his will to continue living, that's the current event. That especially significant event too causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the seventh reason, the seventh cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. Finally, Ānanda, when the Tathagata breathes his last breath by entering into final parinibbāna, with no residues whatsoever remaining, anupadisesa, that's what it means, no residues remaining, nor clinging to anything, then that very significant event especially causes the earth to tremble, quiver, and shake. This is the eighth reason, the eighth cause for the arising of mighty earthquakes. These, Ānanda, are the eight reasons, the eight causes for the mighty earthquakes to take place. Venerable Ānanda didn't say anything, if you notice. So Lord Buddha then has to introduce another teaching or something else to kind of get Ānanda out of his state. Many commentators, many teachers even today, continue saying that Ānanda's mind, like we even saw in the portion of the sutta, which probably was even maybe done by like commentators perhaps, who might have added that section that Mara must have blinded the mind of Venerable Ānanda. But we weren't there, we don't know for sure. But we shouldn't forget the fact that Venerable Ānanda was also of the same age as Lord Buddha. So he was 80 years old. Many people forget that 80-year-old individuals sometimes, even before then actually, they start to forget things or not be present. Perhaps that was also a factor. I don't know. So next section's title is The 8 Assemblies. Further, Ānanda, there are these 8 kinds of assemblies. Assembly of Kshatriyas, the warriors, to which Lord Buddha belonged, as Siddhartha Gautama. He came from royal family. Assembly of Brahmins, assembly of householders, assembly of recluses, assembly of Devas of the realm of the 4 great kings, assembly of Devas of the realm of the 33, Tavatinsa, assembly of Maras, and the assembly of Brahmas. And I recall, Ānanda, how I have been to each of these 8 kinds of assemblies, be they the assembly of Kshatriyas, Brahmins, householders, recluses, Devas in the realm of the 4 great kings, Devas in the realm of the 33, assembly of Maras, and the assembly where Brahma gods would gather. All these assemblies I have attended, where the attendants were in the hundreds in each. And before sitting myself among them, or starting the conversation or the discussion, I transformed myself so that both my appearance and voice were just like theirs. All this so that I may be able to teach them the Dhamma, as I instructed, inspired, uplifted, explained, and gladdened their hearts. Yet, throughout the time that I was speaking to them thus, they did not know nor recognize me, and they would inquire of one another, asking, "Who is he speaking to us like this? Is he a man or a deva?" Then, having taught them the Dhamma, and having instructed, inspired, uplifted, explained, and gladdened their hearts, I would immediately vanish from their midst. And once I had vanished too, they did not know nor recognize me, and they would inquire of one another, asking, "Who is he who just vanished? Was it a man or a deva?" These, therefore, Ānanda, are the 8 kinds of assemblies. Of course, it's, Lord Buddha is listing the 8. And by the way, we have this listing in several other suttas, including in the Dīgha Nikāya. But we can, of course, take this as, face value, and Lord Buddha having attended several different assemblies in all these different realms. But how is this related to us? That's what I would like to also ask whenever I'm reading a sutta like this. How is this helping me? Even as a therapist, I would ask the patient to look at their way of thinking, their reasoning, whatever is going on, verbal sankhara, whatever it is. How is this helping me? In this case, how is this sutta encouraging me? What is it trying to say? How is it trying to help me improve my life, especially in the context of the Dhamma? Many of us find ourselves in situations where we have to talk with individuals, engage in a conversation with individuals who might not be on the same page, as it were, as we are with the Dhamma, for example. So how do you communicate with them? Let's say your boss, your certain acquaintance, or the person on the street, the person in the store. And do you get swept into the whirlpool of whatever common, mediocre, superficial, empty conversation, which is part of musavada, right? Frivolous speech. Would you just be sucked into that wormhole, and then have regrets later on? What did I just talk about for 40 minutes or 20 minutes? That was utter useless talk. Versus looking at this section and seeing how we can walk into any kind of assembly and take on their shape, their voice, becoming non-threatening in a way to them. But at the same time, trying to inculcate, infuse into the conversation elements of Dhamma. That's what I see here. That each of us can, if we want to change the world, if we want to slow down the sasana's demise, the crumbling, then each of us has a responsibility towards it. To engage in a conversation, even if you don't have to say anything, your behavior, is it Dhammic or not? Is it Dhamma or Adhamma? Even though you're mingling with them, you're walking with them, this and that. Now, I'm not encouraging us to go into situations where we are compromising ourselves, like going into nightclubs or places where, there's alcohol, this and that, because that's dangerous. Whether you think you're strong enough or not, eventually it will affect you. But situations, work environments, etc., people discussing games, trivial things, basically, as far as the Dhamma is concerned. So that's how I would interpret the usefulness of this section. Because again, Lord Buddha never taught anything that was not helpful to the listener, even if that listener happens to come across this sutta 26 centuries later. Next, we get to the section that says 8 bases of transcendence. And in Pali, it's abhibhayatana, the 8 bases of transcendence, which you can think of them as ways with which we can overcome our tendencies, our reactions to whatever comes through the senses. So it's you're transcending, you're overcoming the reactionary attitude of the Puthujjana. So that's one way of looking at it. Also, Ānanda, there are these 8 bases of transcendence. And what are the 8? When someone, on perceiving objects in his mind, whether seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are small and limited in their size and outline, whether beautiful or ugly, he is able to transcend them by penetrating into and perceiving their true essence, whereby he declares, I know and see it for what it is. This is the first base of transcendence. We live in a world where it's so easy to grab our attention and to pull us in, so you are sold the story. You become the story. You become whatever it is that they want you to become. You get sucked in to the whole thing that they're selling us. Images, billboards, news. So the first base of transcendence, Lord Buddha is talking about someone who is able to see this thing, whether it's a beautiful thing, ugly thing, whatever, and he's able to see and know and understanding it for what it is. So there is a wall. He is identifying. So there is a protection. Indriya Bhavana Sutta, if you remember, from the Majjhima Nikāya that I covered in the past. That's what it is. It's you're cultivating protection of the faculties. You're looking at how can I not be sucked into this whirlpool of whatever it is that's representing, which oftentimes it is Dhamma, Adhamma, taking us away from Dhamma. Also, when someone, on perceiving objects in his mind, so that was something outside of you, okay? Something that the world is presenting to you through the 6 senses. In this case, let's see, when someone, on perceiving objects in his mind, whether seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are vast and limitless in their size and outline, whether beautiful or ugly, he is able to transcend them by penetrating into and perceiving their true essence, whereby he declares, I know and see it for what it is. This is the second base of transcendence. So the first one was external, but they were limited In this case, they are vast. They are vast in size. And we didn't come to the other one that I was, yes. So let's without jumping ahead of myself. So this one has to do with the limitlessness of the object. So the first one was limited. Also, you can think of this also in terms of the jhanas, by the way. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, only seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are small and limited in their size and outline, whether beautiful or ugly, he is able to transcend them by penetrating into and perceiving their true essence, whereby he declares, I know and see it for what it is. This is the third base of transcendence. Someone who's not able to see objects subjectively. So the first two, they can see objects in their mind. So oftentimes we fall in love with our ideas, what we're thinking. Sometimes during interviews, students come, and they're like the advocates, the lawyers of whatever concepts they have in their minds. And they want to convince the listener, even the teacher, of the authenticity of this thing that they're having in their mind. Some of them are finite, some of them are infinite or limitless or vast. They are arupa in a sense. But in either case, they're just productions of the mind. So one has to transcend them. In the third case, the person is unable to do that subjectively, but they become enmeshed, pulled into the forms that are externally presented to them. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, only seeing form and shapes external to himself that are vast and limitless in their size and outline, whether beautiful or ugly, he is able to transcend them by penetrating into and perceiving their true essence, whereby he declares, I know and see it for what it is. So something as simple, well, not as simple, but whenever we see an image put out by NASA or this highly, highly sophisticated telescope that all of a sudden brings us these beautiful imagery of vast galaxies and things, some people really are challenged by that to the point where the limitlessness of it has become for them the ultimate truth in a sense. They become slaves to that. And such a person here, the person here, the fourth base of transcendence, is a person who sees through that as an object. It really doesn't matter whether it is limitless or limited for these individuals, respectively. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are blue in color, blue in their tone, or of blue luster, like the blossoms of a flax flower, which is blue, or like fine blue silk from Benares, smooth on both sides, blue in its luster, blue in its tone, blue in its color. Similarly, such a person, although unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, but who sees forms and shapes external to himself that are blue in color, blue in their tone, or of blue luster, yet he is able to transcend them by penetrating into and perceiving their true essence, whereby he declares, I know and see it for what it is. This is the fifth base of transcendence. The blue has also been used as a kasina practice for concentration. That some people might use this section as a representation of that. But we can also look at it as a person who penetrates and goes deeper than what often happens with individuals with poetic leanings, images. Some people write poetry about the blueness of the sky, or the blue color in a mate's eyes. I don't know, something like that. And they become slaves to it, objectifying it. This person, however, will see through it. They will transcend it. And Lord Buddha, whenever you see these, they usually come in the four. So you have blue, you have yellow, you have red, and you have white. So they will go in, together. So Lord Buddha is now going to talk about yellow. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are yellow in color, yellow in their tone, or of yellow luster, like a kanikara flower, which is yellow, or like fine yellow silk from Benares, smooth on both sides, yellow in its luster, yellow in its tone, yellow in its color. By the way, kanikara flower, sometimes called the champak flower, is also from the plumeria family. And it's a beautiful flower, but it has a fragrance unlike any. And sometimes it is completely yellow. Other times it's whitish on the edges, but it's very, very yellow on the center where the petals come together. Very yellow. So it's interesting that, it's being referred to here. Similarly, such a person, although unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, but who sees forms, etc., he goes beyond and says, I know and see it for what it is. This in reference to the yellow color. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are red in color, red in their tone, or of red luster, like a bandujivaka flower, which is red, or like fine red silk from Benares, smooth on both sides, red in its luster. By the way, Benares was known, and you see references to it throughout the suttas, even though usually it is referred to as Kasi, silk from Kasi. It's also referred to as Benares or Varanasi. And it was known for its silk throughout India, the finest silk. I don't know if they still produce it, because Kasi or Benares is no longer the Benares of Lord Buddha's day. So, so that's a reference to it. And Bandujivaka, the redness of it, the flower that is you can think of the closest to it is the a representation of it is the red poppy seed flower. Really vibrant red, like really solid red color. Such a person, etc., is able to penetrate and says, I know and see it for what it is. This is the seventh base of transcendence. Also, when someone unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, seeing forms and shapes external to himself that are white in color, white in their tone, or of white luster, like a morning star, which is white, or like fine white silk from Benares, smooth on both sides, white in its luster, white in its tone, white in its color. Similarly, such a person, although unable to perceive objects in his mind subjectively, but who sees forms and shapes external to himself that are white in color. Again, we're doing either kasina. You can look at it in the form of a kasina practice, because the person has to be absorbed. If it's the kasina practice that this is referring to, Lord Buddha is not referring to it in that sense. But someone who's looking into the objective world and seeing white, but you're not being absorbed in it. And this also is a reference, the way I see it, to practicing vipassana, because you have to transcend appearances. That's why it's called vipassana. It's penetrative seeing. So you cannot just look at it, be absorbed in it, and that's it. That's your finish line. Otherwise, you have not transcended it. That's why the jhanas of the kasina practice, even the ones that they practice within the Buddhist tradition, in some places, they do not lead to liberation, period, because they do not lead to transcending the object, unless the person is being taught by a proficient teacher, caring, compassionate teacher, to show them how to transcend the kasina or the color or this or that. These Ānanda are the 8 bases of transcendence. Then Lord Buddha comes to the next section, is called the 8 freedoms, vimukha. So this is referring to the mind's temporary release that takes place. so these two sections actually, transcendence and 8 freedoms, are very much linked together. That's why Lord put put them together. So now, Ānanda, there are these 8 freedoms. And what are the 8? While having formed oneself, one perceives forms. This is the first freedom. This is referring to the 4 jhanas, using the kasina derived from the body as an object from your own body. So we have the 32 parts of the body, for example. You could use those as your object of meditation. So they could be leading you to jhanas. Kesa loma nakadanta tacho, the 5 parts of the body that we get during our high ordination as bhikkhus is a perfect example of that. Some bhikkhus are encouraged by their preceptor to use that, and they really take it to heart and they practice just those. So, and they definitely can attain, if they have the merits, also to attain to freedom with those aspects of the practice. From using their body. No longer being aware of having form, one perceives forms outside of oneself. This is the second freedom. So here we're talking about a kasina outside of the body, what I was referring to earlier in the previous section, in the transcendence bit. That's where many people will use a disc or light or flame, or just look at empty space, or the color blue, like we went over, looking at a blue sky. That is the external object that they use as a method for their practice. Okay, so seeing and experiencing only what is beautiful. This is the third freedom. So here you can use either a colored kasina, so where you just, like in the case of patavi, or the earth kasina, the person just keeps saying patavi, 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 and just looking. And so you need to be absorbed, completely sucked into it. So you truly are concentrating. So in the same way, this could be the beautiful. You look at beautiful things, a beautiful flower. I was mentioning the plumeria, or a beautiful sunset. Sunset will not last as long as a plumeria, even though plumeria will also fade. But many people also will use the Brahma Viharas, but without the Vipassana portion. So they just are absorbed in metta or compassion, and that's their practice. They never see the mind's fluctuations. They never are working with the hindrances. There's a huge difference between the practice of the Brahma Viharas that I have taught you, that include in there the Vipassana portion. So the person can actually break through by using metta, taking you all the way through into the upekka state of, but while also being aware of what the mind is doing. Hence, the relaxed step has to be included, and being able to see what the mind is doing. The tension, you need to recognize that the tension is there. There's tanha. What does that mean? Then it means that there's Dhamma Vichaya there. You're seeing it. There's Pañña there. So you're not absorbed, like in many cases where people talk about, let's say, poets who have been absorbed in the practice of metta in one form or another. I've heard people ask me in the past about Sufi masters, for example, Rumi or Hafiz or other traditions as well, even from within Buddhism. And it's very poetic and very loving and compassion driven, this and that. Isn't that the same? No, it's not. And we have very clear instructions from Lord Buddha in the suttas distinguishing the noble disciple who practices Brahma Vihara the way that Lord Buddha taught it as a way of liberation, and other practitioners from other sects, Lord Buddha says, who just do the Brahma Viharas because they will be reborn, if they did it right, in that sense, in the Brahma realms. But once the merits are over, the person will fall back into this world or maybe even lower. But not the noble disciple who has worked with vipassana, with insight. Crucial to understand. Okay, so, excuse me, let me get some water. By completely transcending all perceptions having to do with material form, by the disappearance of all perceptions having to do with sense reaction, and by giving no attention to perceptions of diverse phenomena, one becomes aware of, attains to, and remains in the sphere of infinite space. This is the fourth freedom. So this and the next three are referring to liberations or freedoms that have to do with the immaterial attainments, meaning the arupa jhanas, basically. So, and then he goes, by completely transcending the sphere of infinite space, one becomes aware of, attains to, and remains in the sphere of infinite consciousness. This is the fifth freedom. By completely transcending the sphere of infinite consciousness, one becomes aware of, attains to, and remains in the sphere of nothingness. This is the sixth freedom. Now, sixth freedom doesn't mean the sixth jhana. Lord Buddha had different categorizations depending on who he was speaking to and what he was trying to speak about. If he were to speak about the jhanas, pure and simple, he would list the sphere of nothingness as the seventh jhana. So some of you might be wondering, why is it sixth instead of the seventh? So he's talking about the 8 freedoms. By utterly transcending the sphere of nothingness, one attains to and remains in the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception. This is the 7th freedom. And by utterly transcending the sphere of neither perception nor non-perception, one attains to and remains in the cessation of perceptions and feelings. This is the 8th freedom. And this is the attainment of cessation. Right? Sanya Vedahita Nirodha Samapatti. This is, so if we were using the formula of the jhanas, then this would be number 9. Okay, but we're not using that schema. We're using 8 liberations or 8 freedoms that Lord Buddha is delineating for us. And these, Ānanda, are the 8 freedoms. Now, this is where Lord Buddha stops talking about other things because Ānanda was not making use of the opportunity, because remember, he came inquiring about the earthquake. Even though Lord Buddha again told him, hey, the 7th type of earthquake is when the Tathagata relinquishes his will to continue living. Ānanda didn't get it. So Lord Buddha wanted to make the most of, try to gauge Ānanda where he is mentally at that time, probably, by teaching him these other things. Coax him to get to this point, where the heading of this section is Mara's former temptation. So this is where Lord Buddha is going to fill in the blank for Ānanda. Further, Ānanda, at one time, soon after my supreme awakening, once when I was staying at Uruvela, on the bank of the Neranjara river, at the foot of the goat herd's banyan tree, Mara, the mischievous one, approached me. Standing to one side, Mara then spoke these words to me. It is now time, Bhante, for the Blessed One to attain his final full release. Let the Sugata fully and completely pass away. The time has come for the Parinibbāna of the Lord. Then, Ānanda, I replied to Mara, the mischievous one, I shall not come to my final passing away, O mischievous one, until my bhikkhus have all come to be true noble disciples, who are wise. And he says the same thing about the bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, and the upasakas and upasikas, who are wise, well-disciplined, capable, and learned, preservers of the Dhamma, living according to and firmly established in the Dhamma, until my bhikkhus, bhikkhunis, upasakas, and upasikas live by the appropriate conduct, and having learned the Master's word, are able to expand it, preach it, proclaim it, establish it, reveal it, explain it in detail, and make it clear, until they are fully able to refute any adverse opinions and doctrines that might arise, being able to overcome them thoroughly while explaining in a convincing manner, as they teach the true and liberating Dhamma. So he repeats this for each of the bhikkhunis, upasikas, and upasikas. And further, Ānanda, I said to Mara. So basically, earlier we saw Mara telling Lord Buddha, reminding him, remember when you said those things? So now Venerable Lord Buddha is saying this to Venerable Ānanda, what he said to Mara. So it's interesting how if you were a screenwriter, you would see all these conversations and link them up in order. It's lovely the way it's formulated in the sutta. I shall not come to my final and full release, O mischievous one, until this holy life taught by me has become successful, prosperous, widespread, popular, extensive, and well known, until it is well proclaimed and spread far and wide among devas and humans. And then, he says, today, Ānanda, Mara, the mischievous one, again approached me at the Chāpala shrine while saying, now, Bhante, the Blessed One does have bhikkhus, bhikkhunis. So he repeats what Mara, we saw him say to Lord Buddha. So now Lord Buddha is directly recounting what Mara said earlier while Ānanda was sitting away from Lord Buddha, before Lord Buddha relinquished his will to continue living. When this was said to Mara, that he is going to leave his body, is going to pass away in 3 months' time. Do not trouble yourself, O mischievous one. Before long, the Parinibbāna of the Tathagata will soon come to pass. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will enter final full release. In just this manner, Ānanda, it was at the Chāpala shrine that the Tathagata relinquished his will to continue living on. So now he made it blatantly clear to Ānanda as to what had happened and why there was an earthquake. So Venerable Ānanda was a slow learner. We can say that. Even though we owe the whole suttas pretty much to Venerable Ānanda, the dichotomy or the interesting or the weird fact is that despite his photographic memory of knowing and remembering all these verses of Lord Buddha's that he had witnessed being spoken to him, despite all that ability, he missed out on Lord Buddha giving him that opportunity. So now we see this next section which says, Venerable Ānanda's appeal. In hearing these words, the Venerable Ānanda spoke to the Blessed One by saying, Bhante, may the Blessed One please remain for an entire lifespan. May the Sugata please remain and fully complete it until the end of his lifespan. Please, O Lord, stay for the welfare and happiness of the multitude of beings throughout, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, the well-being, and happiness of both devas and humans. The Blessed One, however, replied by saying, Enough, Ānanda. Do not make this request from the Tathagata. For the time is now past, Ānanda, for such an appeal to be made. Time's up. You wasted your opportunity, he's saying. But for a second and a third time, the Venerable Ānanda kept entreating the Blessed One. Bhante, please, he says the same thing. Then the Blessed One said, Ānanda, do you have faith in the awakening of the Tathagata? What a strike to the jugular, if you will, because this is the teacher asking the student whether the student has faith in the awakening of their teacher. In this case, the Tathagata. So what is Venerable Ānanda going to say? And the Venerable Ānanda replied, yes, of course, O blessed Lord, I do. Then why, Ānanda, do you keep persisting against the Tathagata, even to the third time? The third time is always, it's an interesting number when a person asks a question or when Lord Buddha is asking someone a question. So you never wait for the third time or you expect there to be a fourth time because there's consequences to that we see in the suttas. But in this case, he's asking Lord Buddha for the third time, expecting a different outcome. So, Lord Buddha is saying, why are you doing this? Because I already told you all that took place and you missed out. Then the Venerable Ānanda said, because, O Blessed Lord, I have heard and learned from the Blessed One himself when the Blessed One spoke these words to me. Ānanda, this is very interesting. Whoever has fully developed and cultivated, practiced, retained, strengthened, maintained, scrutinized, and brought to perfection the four constituents of psychic power could, if he so desired, remain alive for an entire lifespan or fully complete it until the end of that lifespan. The Tathagata Ānanda has perfected those constituents of psychic power. Therefore, if the Tathagata so desires, he could remain alive for an entire lifespan or fully complete it until the end of that lifespan. It's interesting to hear this because that tells us clearly that Venerable Ānanda was aware. He heard Lord Buddha speaking these words to him, giving him his clear, obvious hint. So it's interesting to see the dynamic as to why then Venerable Ānanda did not ask. And did you believe these words spoken to you by the Tathagata Ānanda? This is interesting how Lord Buddha is replying. Yes, of course, O Blessed Lord, I did. Then Ānanda, the fault is yours and yours alone. For you have failed, because despite this very obvious hint I have given you, yet you remained quiet, unable to grasp this very clear and significant indication offered to you by the Tathagata. And therefore, you did not then entreat the Tathagata to remain. Because if you had done so, Ānanda, twice the Tathagata might have declined, but on the third time, he would have consented. Remember the third attempt I said, the first, second? The third is very crucial. So Lord Buddha is saying, even if I had declined your request to complete the lifespan, by the third request, I would have said yes, I would have consented. Therefore, Ānanda, the fault is yours and yours alone, for you have failed. At Rajagha Ānanda, now Lord Buddha is going to remind Ānanda of the other many places where Lord Buddha had offered him the same clue, the same clear indication, which were not listed in the sutta. So now, through inference and through Lord Buddha mentioning of them, we see that this occurrence had happened before. In each of these places that we have been seeing, both of them walk through. Lord Buddha, whenever he turned to Venerable Ānanda and says, Ānanda, let's go to Vulture's Peak. Ānanda, let's go to Nalanda. We see here what was not mentioned in the sutta itself when we were in those sections. But now we're seeing it in retrospect. At Rajagha Ānanda, while we were staying at the Vulture's Peak, I spoke to you these words. Ānanda, Rajagha is quite lovely, and so are its Gidja cliffs with their Vulture's Peak. Then I added, Ānanda, whoever has fully developed and cultivated practice, etc., with Iddhipadas, he could extend to the whole lifespan. But despite this very obvious clue, Ānanda, you did not grasp this very clear and significant indication given to you by the Tathagata. And then he says, the fault is yours and yours alone, for you have failed to request. And Ānanda continues by, Lord Buddha continues actually. Ānanda, the same occurred again in Rajagha, but this time while we were staying at the Gautama banyan tree, and later at the Robber's Cliff, at the Sattapanni cave on the Vibhara mountain, at the Black Rock of Isigili, at the Serpent's Pool in the cool forest, at the Tapoda Hot Springs Monastery, at the Bamboo Grove in the Squirrel's Feeding Ground, at Jivaka's Mango Grove, and at the Maddakuchi Deer Park, where I spoke to you the same words. So Lord Buddha is saying, all of these places, I have put this in front of you. You might have been absent-minded in one place or another, this and that, but all these were missed opportunities. Similarly, on different occasions, the Tathagata has spoken to you by saying, Ānanda Vesali is quite lovely. It shrines too. So he repeats what we came across today about the Udena, Gotamaka, Sattambaka, Bahutaka, and Chapala shrine, and how Venerable Ānanda missed it. And then he says, anyhow, Ānanda, have I not taught you from the very beginning that with all things and relationships that are near and dear to us, there is the inevitability of change, of separation, and of saying goodbye? After all, whatever that is born, comes into being, is conditioned, and therefore subject to crumbling and decay. How can then one expect them to somehow not fall apart? For such a state of affair can never come to be, as it is not the nature of things. But this itself, Ānanda, is what the Tathagata has left behind and finished with. That which he has relinquished, given up, basically his body, and all these relationships and even his responsibilities. Not that he was attached to his teaching, his students, this and that, or even the Sangha. That which he has relinquished, given up, abandoned, rejected, and along with it, he has relinquished his will to continue to live on. And to this effect, Ānanda, now the Tathagata's words have been spoken once and for all. So he's saying, don't bring this up again. Don't ask me again. Don't appeal again, because it is useless. It's done. Before long, the Parinibbāna of the Tathagata will soon come to pass. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will enter final full release. And for the Tathagata to somehow withdraw his words for the sake of continuing to live on, once the life force has been given up, such a thing is itself an impossibility. So once the Tathagata has said something and is conclusively done, never can be taken back, because there's a legacy of Tathagatas before our Lord Buddha. So there is a standard. That's what makes them a Tathagata. So he's saying, I cannot make an exception. The next section is called the last admonition. So then, Ānanda, let us now go to the hall of the gabled house in the great forest. And the Venerable Ānanda replied, as you wish, Lord. So he dropped it. So he knew, that's it, it's done. So 3 months' time, Lord Buddha is going to go. Then the Blessed One, accompanied by the Venerable Ānanda, went to the hall of the gabled house in the great forest. And once there, the Blessed One instructed the Venerable Ānanda by saying, now, Ānanda, go and have all the bhikkhus living in Vesali come and gather in the assembly hall. Very well, Lord, replied the Venerable Ānanda, as he quickly went and did as he was directed by the Blessed One. Once the bhikkhus had gathered, then Venerable Ānanda approached the Blessed One by informing him, Bhante, the Sangha of bhikkhus is now assembled. May the Blessed One do as he sees fit. Thereupon the Blessed One arose from his seat and went to the assembly hall, and by taking his appointed seat there, he addressed the bhikkhus thus. O bhikkhus, all these years past, the teachings I have made known to you, by sharing them with you, stem from directly knowing and experiencing them myself. These you must apply yourselves to thoroughly know the Dhamma that I taught you by learning, cultivating, developing, and constantly engaging in its practice, so that the pure and holy life may be firmly established, as it sustains itself by lasting for a long time. This is essential for the welfare and happiness of the multitude out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, well-being, and happiness of both gods and humans, or devas and humans. Every one of us, not just bhikkhus, every one of us who have some love, respect, appreciation of the Dhamma, this is the call that Lord Buddha is making to us to do, to engage in. We need to learn. So this is a call for action for every single person. Don't rely on bhikkhus, don't rely on Sangha as such to do the work, to sustain the Dhamma, to sustain it, to make it last long. That's what I was saying in the beginning of this exploration that we're doing today. The welfare of happiness of the multitude relies on us by first tasting it ourselves. And by extension, everyone else will be affected. Just like when you're keeping your Sīla, everyone else is being affected. That's what Mara is getting defeated by moment, because he's seeing that 26 centuries later, the Dhamma is still alive. Not as much as you know, as much as we would like in the world, but there are people who are practicing. Every time you are cognizant of, wait a minute, am I aware of my actions, of my words, of my thoughts? Every time you do that, you're actually uncovering Mara's tricks. You're not being fooled. And even more importantly, you're making sure that the Dhamma that Lord Buddha taught for 45 years is still being kept alive in you. Remember, we call it a dark age when there is not even a single human being on the planet who has the Dhamma in their heart. If there's one person who still practices, who still has Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña, it is not considered a dark age in this Dhamma and discipline. Even if there's one person, there's Dhamma in the world. And that tells us how important that one person is. That person should be each one of us. And that's why I keep saying, if we can get about 1 million people to practice Sīla, Samādhi, Pañña, no harm could come to this planet. In fact, this planet could evolve, truly. And all the negative influences that are at play in the world on such a massive scale, unprecedented in human history, will be subdued, if not destroyed completely. Something to think about. Again, bhikkhus, what are these teachings? They are, so Lord Buddha is now going to very shortly summarize. They are the things, the teachings that he tasted for himself directly, and then he taught them to his bhikkhus. They are the 4 foundations of mindfulness, satipatthana, the 4 right efforts, the 4 constituents of psychic power, the 5 spiritual faculties, the 5 spiritual powers, the 7 factors of awakening, and the noble eightfold path. These, bhikkhus, are what I have taught you from my own direct and personal experience, having known and understood them unequivocally through direct knowledge, and thus I have guided and instructed you in, which you should now thoroughly learn, cultivate, develop, and constantly engage in its practice, so that the pure and holy life may be firmly established, as it sustains itself by lasting for a long time. This is essential for the welfare and happiness of the multitude, out of compassion for the world, for the benefit, well-being, and happiness of both devas and humans. Then the Blessed One said to the bhikkhus, "So, bhikkhus, I exhort you, all compounded things are subject to fall apart and vanish. Strive now with diligence. The time of the Tathagata's Parinibbāna is near. 3 months from now, the Tathagata will attain final full release and die." And after having spoken these words to the bhikkhus, the Sugata, the master, continued by uttering these verses. "My years are now fully ripe, with a very short lifespan left. Having relinquished it all, I shall depart from you, while relying on no one else but myself as my refuge. Be earnest, then, O bhikkhus, always remaining mindful and with pure virtue. Equipped with firm resolve, guard well your own hearts. For whoever untiringly lives according to the Dhamma and the Vinaya leaves behind the cycles of rebirths and puts the final end to all suffering. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. So that is where we will stop today. So I wanted to finish that section because I'm already working on, I've translated already a portion of the next upcoming week's portion. So we can, I think we might have maybe at least 1 week, but probably 2 more weeks of the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta. It well deserves it because it's the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta, of course. So I wanted to stop and see if there are thoughts, questions, comments about what we've covered. And yeah, please speak up instead of raising your hand because I can't see the rest of you, just 6 of you.
Thanks very much, Bhante, for the very, very profound recitation of the Parinibbāna, probably the most important sutta of all. And I guess the greatest lesson that I took away from this sutta is that in many sense, we are just like Ānanda, are we not? So we miss all the lessons, we miss all the hints. We have been listening to so many suttas, we have been, going on so many retreats. And, time does not wait for anybody. So if at the end of our lives, we fail to attain to Khinasava, or at least 3 and 3, then the fault is all ours. So my take would be that it's time for us to arouse Samvega, lest we regret, like Ānanda on deathbed. That's my...
Beautifully stated, Upatissa, beautifully stated. Well on point and timely. Lord Buddha gave the example of the spoon that will never taste the soup. Never. No matter how close the spoon is, it will never taste the soup. Now, what brought that simile that Lord Buddha introduced to mind here now is how, given what you just mentioned about Venerable Ānanda and how he might very well be a representation of us, each of us, is that I see him at that point as the spoon. And Lord Buddha was the soup for 25 years for Venerable Ānanda. So many times you see Lord Buddha urging Venerable Ānanda to go ahead and do, practice. Yes, we owe him so much, yes. But as far as Lord Buddha was concerned, he could have done all this, but while being an Arahant. But he did not put enough attention. He did not have enough Samvega. That's why he had to suffer, because he especially is starting to suffer from this point on until the moment of Lord Buddha's death, which we will see coming up in the next week or so. He's in pain. He's realizing. In a way, he's very much like Channa, who will also suffer. Channa, who was Lord Buddha Siddhartha's childhood friend. He was also the charioteer who actually helped Lord Buddha escape the palace life. So he would always show off to all the bhikkhus for 45 years that, hey, all of you come second, I am first, he would say. Because I was there when Lord Buddha renounced. I was there when he cut his royal hair, when he shaved his head, when he gave up his jewelry, when I was there. None of you, Sariputta, Moggallana, none of you were there. Ānanda, you weren't there. I was there. But he never practiced. He never practiced. Many of us I see doing the same thing today in our own unique ways, in our own capacities. But ultimately, we need to shake ourselves into urgency. One way that you can do this is if you have a loved one, someone that you hold so dear, someone whose presence in your life is so important, to the point where you never even want to entertain, even millisecond, the idea of them departing, dying. I urge you, I encourage you to go ahead and hold their hand or their foot or something of theirs, something that's there, that's them. Hold their hand, hold their finger, something that is still pulsating with life, and visualize it coming apart. See the lovely, plump finger, perhaps, or the hand that's so full of life, pulsating with life, slowly wither. And you're holding now nothing but a thin, thin layered bag with bones sticking out. And then you look up and you see them dying, because that day will come. One of you at least will go first. Because death is the best way that Samvega could be aroused in a person. Remember, the Dhamma is lovely in so many different ways. There's not enough synonyms for how beautiful it is. But it means nothing if we cannot compare it and put it face to face with what the Dhamma was teaching all along throughout the life that you had. What you were saying also, Upatissa, the urgency of this life, because many of us are taking it for granted. We're lost in relationships. We're lost in juiciness. The relationships could also be with your own ideas, by the way, even if you're living alone, right? It could be subjective relationships with ideas, with dreams. Dreams of achieving something, but never do achieve it. How would you deal with the fact that this loved one whose hand you're holding has died, will die? How will you deal with that? That is where the Dhamma must be pertinent for you, must have something to offer you, must be lived by you, in fact. And that is urgency. That's how I understand it. And some people say, oh, Bhante, you're too gloomy, you too this or too that, or you Buddhists are very pessimistic. No, we're very factual. We're very factual. But with life, with metta in our hearts, with compassion in our hearts, with responsibility towards the planet, towards ourselves. And I can't be responsible for the planet without being responsible towards myself and you, my neighbor, my fellow human being. So, but there needs to be that sense of urgency, which is the reason why many times I've mentioned throughout the world, wherever I've been, if you're listening to the Dhamma, if you're reading a wonderful treatise or thesis or a book or an article by a Dhamma teacher, legitimate Dhamma teacher, legitimate because they must be going back to the source, Lord Buddha's teachings, the suttas. That's what makes it legitimate Dhamma. We have to say it like it is. We have to be protectors of the Dhamma, not close an eye or two. And then look at the teaching given to you, offered to you, and look for the presence of Samvega that will jolt you into the present moment, jolt you into the fact that everything is conditioned. Sabbe sankhara anicchati. All conditioned things are impermanent. Because they're impermanent, they are full of dukkha. Full of dukkha. It's not just that they're passing, they're full of dukkha because this person you're holding in your hands or even in your eyes or in your heart, they're temporary. Can you wrap your mind around that? This person I love is temporary. That should immediately stop us in our tracks, immediately, and say, okay, I have to prioritize a few things here. And not to be gloomy, it's not a melancholic journey. No, not at all. Far from it. Because we're bringing in the sukha instead of the dukkha, because the dukkha is here because of samudaya, which is the cause, which is the holding on to, oh, please don't die. Please don't die. How can I extend it? Let me go and do some prayers. Let me go and do some pujas. Let me make some offerings. Let me tell myself that you, my loved one, are going to be living for another 20, 40, 50 years. Or, even more sneaky than that, I think or I hope that I will die first. So I don't see yourself. I don't see you go, which is even worse, right? Many people have that sneaky contract with themselves, with life. They've convinced themselves that they will die first, right? Some of you are smiling. You know what I'm talking about. All this is Mara, by the way. All of this is Mara. Don't fool yourselves, because it is removing you from taking responsibility, because the death of this loved one or yourself, depending on the relationship you have there, is pulling you away from Samvega, the urgency of it. So stop being the spoon. Stop being the spoon. Many, 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 many people came, and they might have actually met Lord Buddha once. Perfect example is Venerable Bāhiya. He didn't even have a single hour with Lord Buddha, not a single hour, let alone a year or 25 years. But his heart was so ready, full of urgency. He begged and begged and begged Lord Buddha 3 times. And Lord Buddha finally consented. Remember the first 2 times he said now? He did the same thing to Bāhiya. We've covered Mahā Sutta 1 or 2 years ago. But what did Venerable Bāhiya do? He did not miss that opportunity. He was right there at the edge. At the edge. He was living with death, cognizance of death. He said, Bhante, what makes you, I don't know whether I will be alive next moment after your Pindapada is done. I don't even know if Lord Buddha, the Tathagata himself, will be alive after Pindapada. And Lord Buddha realized, well, not realized, but he was waiting for the mind of Bāhiya to calm down, because he had just run about 700 miles in a few days to get to Savatthi. That is urgency. Can you run 700 miles in 3 days? Well, he did. That is called urgency. That is telling yourself, I will no longer be the spoon. So, yes, lovely, lovely notes, lovely comments there, Bhattisa. Any other thoughts, comments?
One.
Yes, Ravi.
Yeah.
Oh, I can't hear you. Oh, try to speak again. Let me. Yes, go ahead.
Namo Buddhaya, Bhante.
Yes, yes.
I don't know whether this is a question, but I see the problem with influences. Totally influenced are we in all what we do, either by culture, by education, knowledge, tradition, association. And in this discourse which Bhante shared today, it's very interesting to see how Ānanda takes the blame for all his reluctance to take the hint that the Buddha put forth. There are two parts to what I see and what I try to engage. One is the unpredictability of a decision. We're never sure how someone responds or reacts. In the case of the Buddha, he accepts, even though he was hinting numerous times in Rajagaha, in Savali, in front of the shrines. But Ānanda did not capture the moment for the moment. And in that, he takes the blame. Is it fair to blame, judge, accuse, censure Ānanda as what happened in the Satapani caves? Right? Or do we see the fact that Mara as an epitome of mischievousness, right word? I really like that.
Yes.
An epitome of mischievousness is actually, Mara is actually Maya, delusion. And we ourselves are trapped in the same delusion of mind.
Yes.
So it is for us to find the strength and the effort, actually, the effort to break the tide of floating away further downstream.
I see. Yes. One of the mistakes that many people have made is blame Venerable Ānanda, which I find to be quite futile, pointless, ultimately. Right. Because after all, again and again, we have to acknowledge the huge fact that we have the Dhamma thanks to Venerable Ānanda. Plain and simple. Okay? And yes, the bhikkhus, the elders of the first council had one day, perhaps I can talk about that, but I've covered the Tipitaka when I was in Malaysia, where I discussed the first council. Anyhow, there were some fingers pointing at Venerable Ānanda that he did this, he did that, and next week we will come across points where segments from those interactions between Lord Buddha and Venerable Ānanda, and see even more kind of touchy subjects or touchy situations where, for example, Lord Buddha is asking for a cup of water, a bowl of water, and Ānanda is stubborn and saying, no, Bhante, let's go somewhere else. So he doesn't have that faith. So it's not about Ānanda. Yes. It's never about Ānanda. That's the thing. Many people don't understand. It's about yourself. It's about the person. What is it generating within you? Because many times I've noticed people, I myself have dealt with this. When I first started years ago, when my teacher, late Bhante Ratanasara, when he told me the story of what happened in the Mahā Parinibbāna, when he was going over this and that subject, this area and that, I felt anger towards Venerable Ānanda. How could I not? How could you? How could you? How could you? All these, but that was my dosa, that had to do. So I did not have the awareness to look at my mind. So using Venerable Ānanda as an example, because ultimately, Lord Buddha didn't care about any of these other things. He was simply chastising Ānanda for Ānanda, period. So he wasn't like carrying the burden for everyone else. So that's a mistake that many people have made in putting the blame of Venerable Ānanda. Lord Buddha is a teacher. Lord Buddha is the teacher of Ānanda, and Ānanda is the student, and Ānanda is hearing the chastising from his teacher. So this is simply a relationship between a teacher and a student. That's it. Nothing else. So when we look at it within that context, we can understand and then make room in our hearts to kind of go beyond, oh, how could Ānanda do that mentality, and see maybe we can learn something, because we're also students of Lord Buddha. At least that's how I like to think of it as. So if I'm a student of Lord Buddha's, okay, what would Lord Buddha be saying to me in this context? Have I been a refuge unto myself, for example? Have I been practicing sati and sampajañña? Obviously, Venerable Ānanda was not, because he missed all these opportunities. I mean, come on, it's not just Vesali, it's Rajagha, it's this place, it's that place. I mean, are you, do you have earplugs? Are you looking the other way when Lord Buddha is talking? How can you be an attendant? How can you be an attendant and not pay attention? So, but we do this all the time. Meaning, when we have what? Asati, the opposite of sati, or amanasikara, no attention. Or even worse, yoniso manasikāra, attention on the wrong things. So even if we take the commentator's version of explanation and see that, oh, Ānanda must have been influenced by Mara, okay, where does that leave us when we are spending most of our time not practicing sati or yoniso manasikāra? This is about you. This is always about the person, the reader, the listener. So I welcome that. So I appreciate your question and comment to look at this scenario. I'm adding that to that as a method for you to place yourself in the Mahāparinibbāna Sutta. That's my goal. Not just this sutta, by the way. Every single sutta. That's why I'm doing these series for a few years now. I want to bring the suttas back from the, from carrying all this dust, bringing them back and making them relevant to you in your life so you could see yourself in them. That's the whole point. So I hope that helps. Very good. Any other questions before we close for today?
Bhante.
Yes. Candana.
Yeah, I just want to know about the visualization exercise, the one that we visualize our love and dear one healthy today, may go off one day.
Mm-hmm.
If we actually do that exercise and I come to a stage where it brings me grief, how should I process it? Because it is like bringing it sooner, right? I have to confront it. Of course, if I have enough wisdom, I won't have the grief. But I know I'm still practicing, and I will be overcome by grief, especially for those that is near and dear to me, if I practice this. So how should I process it when I get to the stage where I get grief?
Beautiful question and a practical question. I really appreciate it, Varuna. I think everyone will benefit from this question that you raised. Let's say we go with the hand, and what I was suggesting is literally hold the hand, or at least sit close. If there isn't let's say you're not in a position to hold the hand, or somebody's upset at you or something, but I encourage you to get that opportunity to do that, or to create that opportunity rather. But even if you're sitting close, look at them. Just when they're, let's say, have their back against you, they're working somewhere, just look at them sitting there in the corner or doing something. Maybe they're standing in the kitchen, watching TV, whatever the situation may be. Look at them. And then imagine the room without them. Imagine the day after they've left. And you're there, you're left behind. Now, of course, this is going to create grief, because there is the sense of dukkha, which we are running away from. That is the reason. This is not to create melancholic states. This is not to create any kind of a depression. Okay? Dukkha is different. Dukkha is pain, suffering. When we're dwelling, when we're attaching ourselves to the possibility that it no longer stays the way it will end up, we're pushing away the possibility for it to be happening. So we are living in wishful thinking, Disney World type of a thing. You're coming back to reality. So the grief comes when you are still resisting it. So this is what I encourage you to do, the process of trusting and letting your heart open up. There will be tears. That's fine. Who said tears are bad? I call them natural eye wash. You know, just relax your heart, open up to it, because sooner or later it will happen. It might not be you crying, it might be them crying over you. Okay? Now, what do you do with this? If it, you know, and when you're holding on to the pain, that's when the, you know, you're adding more dukkha. That is not the objective. Remember, Lord Buddha pointed out dukkha. He didn't say you need to create dukkha. This is very crucial to understand. For 6.5 years, he was creating dukkha as Siddhartha Gautama, the ascetic. That was not the path to the Dhamma, to Nibbana. Remember that. So you're not being asked here to create dukkha. You need to simply acknowledge, without rose-colored glasses, the fact that is there. Meaning this loved one that is here today but will not be here tomorrow. Okay? All right. Okay, so there's going to be some sensations in your heart. You're going to feel sad, maybe cry. But then look back at them. See them. They're here. They are here now. You have access to them. They're not gone yet. So that brings more juiciness to the relationship itself. It becomes more celebratory. It's no longer dull, living in a dead zone, in a sense. Meaning, most of us are not living in the moment. We're living in the past guilt, past pain, or future hopes, or future fears. That means you're not alive. You're living like a zombie. But this image brings, this visualization, as you put it, brings you to life and brings the relationship to life. Now, this is a mature path. The Dhamma is a mature path. We're not convincing ourselves that there's something that there isn't. So it's not wishful thinking. It's a factual thing. But through it, we are finding Nirodha, which is the second thing that Lord Buddha taught. Nirodha, cessation, or the ending of that. Because you are slowly relinquishing the bonds of fear.
Right.
That's what we're living in relationships. Every time you look at someone, you're not enjoying the moment because you're always living in fear that, oh my, I might lose her, I might lose him, I might lose him, let me do this, let me do this. That's not living. That's not living. Actually, Venerable Ānanda was living like that with Lord Buddha. Did you know that? He was not truly in the moment with Lord Buddha.
Right.
Because the moment Lord Buddha mentioned to him that he will leave, he will just die in 3 months, he panicked. Because his world came crashing down. Because he was living in the dead zone. He was always thinking, Lord Buddha, is the Tathagata, I remember this, I remember that, I remember this conversation. But he was not present enough to see Lord Buddha. That's why he didn't remember. That's why he didn't rise up to the occasion and say, Bhante, please, from the first time that Lord Buddha mentioned it, please don't leave. Could you live for the rest of your lifespan, please? He would not have even let Lord Buddha to say it again because he was not present. So while you're in the present, you're not even present to grief anymore. You're present for your loved one. Do you see the difference? Because in order for you to be in grief, you need to relinquish your loved one and hold on to the grief. Do you see what I'm trying to say? Because most of us are in love with sensationalism. We like to hold on to this and cry, even though the person is right there. Why? Why am I missing? Why am I wasting my time? I don't want to be the spoon anymore. Go sit next to them, hold their hand and say, I love you. There's nothing wrong with that. Say to them, I love you. Do you know that? There's nothing wrong with saying to someone, you know, I probably have never said this, but for the life of me, I don't know why. Maybe I was just a coward, perhaps. But I just want you to know that I really, really, truly appreciate you. That's it. And let those words and everything else that will follow release other types of tears. Okay? And that's already the beginning process of really living your life. Then the other things in your life won't really become priorities because you're already living, and that is the biggest priority. Living with Dhamma, because you're living with authenticity. You are not living like a spoon anymore. Does it make sense? Or am I speaking in mystical language?
Very much, Bhante, because we need to know how to process our feelings when it comes.
Yes.
So I just want to make sure if I do that exercise, I can manage the feelings that comes along.
And yes, absolutely. And remember, you're not alone. We are, after all, talking about another person, or at least one person. So when this is happening, please don't think of yourself still living in a vacuum, in a jar, by yourself, having to deal with the aftermath of this by yourself, alone. No. This is, after all, about the person in the room, right? And you're saying, I appreciate you, or I love you, or I don't know what I'll do when you're gone. That is big for another person, but remember, you're not alone. So they will help you. They will say things. They will exhibit behaviors. They might start crying. So remember, you're not alone. So there will be an exchange. So what I'm saying is trust the process. But it relies on honesty, integrity, and metta, beautiful metta at that moment. See, all the metta that I've taught you and you're practicing needs to also have a practical aspect to you in your life where your life becomes more beautiful. Otherwise, it's not just a method for gaining, I don't know, states and jhanas and nonsense like that. No. It must beautify your life with Dhamma. And Dhamma, there's nothing more beautiful than the Dhamma. And your life and your loved ones are the tools, the instruments with which you can taste the Dhamma. That's what I'm trying to say. Sounds
very
good?
clear. Yeah.
Good. Yes. Well, let us pause here because, oh yes, you're most welcome, Peggy. Let us stop here and transfer merits. May suffering ones be suffering free and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief and may all beings find health relief. May all beings share in these merits that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of wholesome happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power share in these merits of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well. May the Triple Gem bless you and your loved ones. And may you enjoy no longer being spoons. May you never lose that smile, that beautiful smile of yours, each and every one of you, that I got to intimately see in person, and I appreciate, and let them grow. So be well. Till next time. Sukhi Hotu.